Okay, this is going to be part 6 of the brainwashing series when it comes to rail worker death investigation reports by the Transportation Safety Board. Here we're going to take a slightly different slant when it comes to the brainwashing by looking at critical information that the Transportation Safety Board leaves out of its investigation reports. Okay, so here we have page 1 of the Railway Investigation Report from the Transportation Safety Board pertaining to the death of conductor trainee Jason Clooney. Now, I want you to notice here where it says at the top, factual information. This is really critical. As we move on in all of these videos, you're going to notice how not only is information left out of reports, but critical information in other processes and, for example, the Occupational Health and Safety Tribunal hearing pertaining to this death, some of this information magically disappears. And case in point here is what is found under factual information in Jason's accident report on page 1, where I have the 4 arrows here. It describes the crew. And if you look at how at point 3, the description of the trainee, it states a conductor trainee who was new to the territory, had limited yard experience, and had yet to fully qualify as a conductor, which would allow him to work independently without a trainer. So clearly the TSB absolutely knows he had to be qualified to work alone. But all these other descriptors of conductor trainee Jason Clooney, that he was new to the territory, had limited yard experience, and had yet to fully qualify as a conductor, which would have allowed him to work independently without a trainer. Those are 4 critical descriptions tied to conductor trainee Jason Clooney in this report, which the Occupational Health and Safety Tribunal of Canada, when it did its hearing known as 2016 OHSTC, which stands for Occupational Health and Safety Tribunal of Canada, case number 20. So it's referred to as 2016 OHSTC 20. That hearing mysteriously has this information removed, and it is critical in how the decision is made. The decisions were made in that hearing. And that, by the way, is a hearing that set extremely nasty precedents for frontline rail workers, in my opinion, making the whole work environment exponentially more dangerous. And we're going to get into a whole lot of that as we go on. Okay, well, on this first page here that is presented before the report starts, the Transportation Safety Board says it investigated this occurrence for the purpose of advancing transportation safety. It is not the function of the board to assign fault or determine civil or criminal liability. So when I say that in previous videos that the Transportation Safety Board's not there to assign fault, even though technically I think it can be argued in court, given the way these reports are written, that they most definitely do assign fault with their causes and contributing factors versus risks, and the words if versus when, and how all these reports are written. They're definitely, in my opinion, written to protect the rail carriers and the regulators, who have clearly not been doing their jobs for years, in my humble opinion. Again, you can form your own. Now, I want to show you also here at the bottom in this summary, we're lied to right from the start in these reports, folks, because the employee was transported by ambulance to the hospital but succumbed to his injuries during transport. Well, folks, that's again an outright lie, because one of the witness statements that we're going to go over in this video clearly states that at the scene, he was told that Jason had died. Okay, so on page 2 of this same death investigation report, look at the very first sentence after the little one-paragraph summary on page 1. This report starts with, the crew members were qualified for their respective positions. Okay, well, in the rail industry, the words have qualified or has qualified has a very specific meaning. And so for them to be using these words, the crew members were qualified, well, that's a subjective statement, because has qualified means you've gone through the training, you've had your qualifying test in the field, and your supervisors have gone through, looked at your appraisals, and made sure and determined whether or not you have qualified for your occupational category. So that is not a subjective, it's a very objective process as far as being qualified. The crew members were qualified, however, is a subjective opinion. But in fact, a conductor trainee is not qualified in the sense of has qualified. And who is the Transportation Safety Board to say that the crew members, including the trainee, was qualified, or that they were all qualified? So they're brainwashing you right from the start, because a trainee by definition is not qualified. And so the Transportation Safety Board does not have the right to say that all crew members were qualified in their respective positions, because a trainee by definition is not qualified, and they knew that. Now, if you look at diagram 2 here, this is a diagram of the accident site. There's several things I need you to notice here. The location of the trainee. He was on this particular siding at the very top here, where they had placed 20 rail cars. The number of rail cars is not accurate on this picture, so they tell you how many rail cars were there. There were 20. Next to the trainee is the derail. And after that, they give you the main line switch number TS23. That is track switch 23. Note the numbers of these switches. 23, lower down, the other red dot is track switch 22. Then the one that doesn't have a highlight, which is just in white, is track switch 21. Note the positions, that the main switch, TS23, closest to the trainee, or Jason, was in reverse position. And also the main switch, TS22, so the second red one, was also reversed. So both those switches had been reversed, according to this diagram. The supervising conductor is right above the elevator, the little building here in this diagram. Right above that, next to that bottom siding, you can see where the supervising conductor was. And based on the length of cars and other information that I put together, this supervising conductor was at least half a mile to 2/3 of a mile from the trainee, which he should have been supervising, but the supervising conductor, even though he had several years with the company, had never been trained in how to properly supervise a conductor. So then we get into the times of arrival, the time stamps, and what happened during the day of the incident here. And again, note at the bottom a footnote that times are Central Standard Times and are approximate. And in the video entitled "It's Just a Matter of Time," we go into why I think that was done. But notice here the first time stamp that we're given is 1750. And so that would be 5:30 p.m. As far as the time that they say prior to arriving. So they weren't there yet. They supposedly arrived right around 1735 at this final work location where Jason would be killed. Okay, again, on page 3 here, I want you to note next to each timestamp in every one of these paragraphs, if you look in paragraph 1, you only see TS 23. On paragraph 2, again, TS 23. Paragraph 3, TS 23. Paragraph 4 has TS 23. Paragraph 5, here we discuss TS 22, TS 21, TS 22 again, 21, 21, and track 21, 22. Then in the last paragraph, they discuss TS 23 and TS 22. Now, the reason that I'm taking the time to point this out specifically, okay, is because this entire report only makes mention of TS 21, TS 22, and TS 23. There is zero reference to any track switch 15 or of track switch 12 or of track switch 13. So the track switches that are mentioned are 21, 22, 23, not 12, 13, and 15. And you're going to see why that's important. Okay, when I block something out like this, by the way, it's because there's a potential copyright issue for pictures. So I block them out because I don't want to deal with copyright issues. I know that the writing is absolutely from the Transportation Safety Board and it's been paid for by taxpayers. But what I want you to notice at the top here is the picture that is taking behind this blocking here. It's mainline track switch 22 in the normal position. Well, what we were told previously in the diagram as to what was where, and I blew it up here so you could see it more easily, track switch 22, first of all, is not the deadly switch that was reversed. That would have been mainline track switch 23, which was in reverse position. Now, if you look at track switch 22, we're told in the diagram that it also was in reversed position. So this is figure 2 provided on page 2 of the report. But on page 4, the picture that you're given of the track switch is for track switch 22, which was not the deadly switch that was reversed by accident, and it's in the wrong position. It's in the normal position, per the information at the very top of page 4 here. Why are they giving you, again, a picture of a track switch in the wrong position? And again, folks, in my opinion, that just plays into the whole let's confuse the reader, provide the wrong information, go back and forth. You know, it's all part of the brainwashing, in my humble opinion. So just something to take note of. And then if we go at the timestamps here, if you look at the first paragraph, again, note, track switch 22. The next paragraph, we discuss, there's nothing in that one. The next one, the small paragraph there, only 2 lines, track switch 22. Timestamp 1817, track switch 22, track switch 23. Then go down to the timestamp 1818, we discussed track switch 23 in both those last 2 paragraphs. So again, take note of how this report is written because it's very critical as far as the brainwashing, as you're going to see. Okay, on page 5, and I'm just going through in these videos and I want to make sure I address every page of this report as far as the brainwashing and other issues that are in it. So on page 5, I've covered this already under the It's Just a Matter of Time video, but again, note that the sunset was given to us at 1710 or 5:10 that afternoon. But if anybody does a search and you know, the actual sunset was actually at 4:57. And remember, per the footnote, we were told that all times were central time and were approximate times. So I can play the timeline like an accordion, and I can give you the wrong time of the sunset to make it look like, oh wait, we didn't really violate the law that much. Well, we violated the law, but it's worse if you let a trainee walk off in the sunset in the dark than maybe, a jury might find walking off in the distance in daylight may not be viewed as being as bad. But when you let them walk off unsupervised, unfamiliar territory in the dark, because it was likely dark before they even arrived at that work location, I think a lot of people would see that as an even more serious offense. So again, why are you estimating a known time with approximate times? The time of the sunset is not an approximate. We've been documenting sunrises and sunsets forever. There's no reason to approximate or give us the wrong time of the sunset in a railway death investigation report. Okay, so here we're going to get into what was left out. And where I pulled this information is from an access to information request that I filed with the Government of Canada to get all the documents I could get pertaining to the death of conductor trainee Jason Clooney. And I ended up getting, I think, 800 pages or so, between, about that. And so you can note here at the top, the arrows, you can see the little flag on the first page here for the Government of Canada, and it tells you the department. You can see that this is the conductor interview. It was 16 pages long, okay? At the bottom of the report, you can see the reference number for all of the, like the bottom one here is the reference number for the collation of all of the information that was provided to me. So that's what that page number is. So if you look here, you can see they block out the name of the conductor, the supervising conductor. And at the bottom, I blocked out the union rep name. They had left that name there. I blocked it out. And I don't trust the Government of Canada. I don't know if they gave me that information to see if I would try and contact that union rep to try and get information, and then they can, try and accuse you of something like harassment or whatever. I do not trust the Government of Canada in anything. And I have good reason for that, folks. So when I block out the union rep name, it's to protect him, but also to protect me. Because I wouldn't want them saying too that I disclosed proprietary information. But anyway, because they failed to do their job and block it out in the first place. But anyways, the other thing I want you to note here is the date of the witness statement. It was November 19th, 2013. Conductor trainee Jason Clooney was killed under the Harper administration, Prime Minister Harper, but all of the lies and the turning of a blind eye, the continuation of lying in reports, whatever, all the brainwashing was absolutely very much continued during the Trudeau administration. And you're going to see why that is. But anyway, so those are the things I want you to notice, that this witness statement was taken the day after Jason died. And if you look at page 2 here, you can see the arrow that actually points to Jason Clooney's name, that he was a conductor trainee, Jason Clooney. So I just want to prove to you where I got this information. I got it through an access to information request. And so the information I'm providing you is as accurate as it can get in the case of this conductor trainee's death. Okay, so on page 6 of the supervising conductor witness statement, we start to get to some very, very critical information that the Transportation Safety Board and Transport Canada also chose to kind of leave out of critical reports. So, because Transport Canada approved this report, remember that, as did the rail carrier. So, it says here on page 6, we went east of track switch 15 of TS15, which is the track switch 15. It is marked TS23 on the switch. Okay, well, there's nothing in here on this figure 2 diagram that were provided in the report pertaining to a track switch 15. Then he states 20 cars were set off onto TS15 track, which is the northernmost track here where it says 20 cars. So he's absolutely referencing this top track and this top switch, TS23, which was the closest to conductor trainee Jason Clooney when he was killed. That was the deadly switch that was flipped backwards. But the problem is, these people that were witnesses and were crew members don't refer to it as TS23. They refer to it as TS15. And you're going to notice here, the conductor, the supervising conductor, works on the ground with the trainee, etc. Whereas the locomotive engineers, they're in the unit. And so you're going to see that they don't make this reference to TS23. The supervising conductor does, because on the ground he would have been able to walk next to that track switch, the actual switch, and the label on that switch would have said TS23 or 23. But the other two crew members do not mention TS23. He just says it is marked TS23, but when working, he's talking about TS15. And as we go through this, you're going to see all his other statements refer to TS15. So clearly, he was more comfortable with talking about TS15 than TS23. So if you're a conductor trainee and you're told, go and flip switch TS15, according to the conductor trainee, there would be no TS15. The switch is labeled TS23. And again, he was working in the dark in unfamiliar territory. So if you look further down here, it says the derail in track TS15, okay, was restored by conductor trainee and the main line switch TS15. So again, the derail is next to the conductor trainee up here, and TS23 is actually, according to how they use the wording when they're working, TS15. If, you know, these if these other crew members were familiar with TS23 and were using the proper wording, why aren't they using track switch 23 is the issue? Where are they getting TS15? And my question, at the time, they had paper maps of the area and whatever. Now I think they've gone to electronic, because I raised all these issues with Transport Canada and the fact that the track switches did not appear to match what might have been in the documentation provided for that work location, either in maps, in their operations manuals, which would be paper at the time, or in their work instructions or whatever. What did the work instructions show for these track switch numbers? Was that TS15 again? Where are they getting this TS15? And that's going to be a key issue, because you're going to see that all three crew members, other than conductor trainee Jason Clooney, who was killed, they all referred to this track switch as TS15. Why? Okay, now if it wasn't bad enough that TS23 was being referred to as TS15 by all three other crew members, as you're going to see, if you look at the bottom here where I highlighted on the conductor interview, page 10, the question is, what were the positions of switches labeled 12 and 13? Oh my gosh, it looks like the other two switches were also not labeled according to what was actually on the switch, TS21 and TS22. It looks like those were actually known as TS12 and TS13. So the answer here was 12 was lined for elevator, 13 was lined for TS15. So that means if you look on this figure here, the one that would be lined for the elevator would have been TS12, also known as TS21 in the diagram. And the other one would have been TS12, according to this conductor, when it's indicated as TS22 in the diagram. So in other words, folks, it looks like all three switches were labeled, the actual switches were labeled something very different than what may have been in the maps, in the work instructions, etc. for that location. And so the huge issue is, this is safety critical information. Why is CN Rail training new employees who are new to the territory with outdated materials? Because they're getting that TS 12, 13, and 15 somewhere. Where is it? Where is that coming from? In my opinion, it could only be outdated materials that would have been located either in the operations manuals, which were paper at the time, or in the work instructions. And so if you're a conductor trainee new to the territory, you're being trained with outdated materials. You're being potentially given work assignments with outdated switch numbers, and you're there in the dark having to guess which switch is which. That's basically the situation, in my opinion, in which this conductor trainee was put. And he did not have the supervising conductor near him to confirm which switch is actually the one that they referred to as TS15. So the conductor in the dark most likely had to guess which switch is TS15. He had nobody to confirm the switch number, and he had nobody to confirm the proper position of the switch. And the fact that this switch was labeled TS23, well, if you look at the picture that I blocked out, I think it's on page 2, of track switch 22 in the normal position, it clearly shows TS22 as the label on the switch. So if it's TS22 as the label and then they show us TS23 on this diagram, that's very likely what was the label too, unlike what may have been in the operations manuals and the actual work instructions. Now, you'll note here, how did things like the wrong switch or track numbers, either verbally or in written instructions or work, documentation, impact what is in this accident report by the Transportation Safety Board, that whole section on situational awareness? Do you think that maybe the fact that the switch numbers, the actual physical switch numbers, not matching what may have been in the operations manuals maps or in the actual work instructions for the day, do you think that the fact that those numbers did not match may have impacted situational awareness for conductor trainee Jason Clooney, who was forced to work alone, in the dark, unsupervised, when he was a trainee and not qualified for that occupational category? A clear violation of regulation SOR 87-150, section 5 and subparagraph A, which prevents rail carriers from allowing trainees to work alone in an occupational category for which they have not qualified. So, again, how would this all have impacted his situational awareness and all of that garbage discussion in the Transportation Safety Board investigation report, that garbage of a rag of lies known as R13W0260? Now, the supervising conductor witness statement was supposed to be 16 pages long. To this day, Transport Canada and the Government of Canada has refused to release the last 5 pages of that report. And you have to ask yourself why. And, if you remember, I knew someone who worked in the same area as conductor trainee Jason Clooney, and that person would have either known of conductor trainee Jason Clooney or known him actually, because this person had also been a conductor trainee in that general work area from Saskatoon to Crooked River and, Tisdale, that whole area. So this person had told me that the word among the trainees and the newly qualified conductors was that Jason was being qualified the day he was killed, taking his qualification test. Now, if that's true, and that's an if that's true, how can he get a qualification test with a supervising conductor who's not even there to double check his work to make sure he's doing it right? And how could he be getting qualified with 0 yard training? Huge issues. So why did the government of Canada withhold the last 5 pages of the supervising conductor's witness statement? Huge question. What's the answer? Okay, so this pretty well concludes this video on brainwashing and how the story du jour is created in Garbage Transportation Safety Board death investigation reports. The key lesson is always question everything, both what is provided and what isn't. That's key. And the only way to get to this information is really through access to information requests and some serious analysis. It's not something that's very easy to do, but it is definitely something that is necessary to do when there's a death or a serious injury in the rail industry. And in my opinion, unions, in order to protect their employees, should have an entire, division where this type of stuff is done. Because, it's one thing to keep complaining that the rail industry is getting more and more dangerous, but to do something about it, to really do something about it, is a tremendous effort. And that is not happening in the unions. And we're going to get into all of those discussions also in another video. Okay, so I'm going to end part 6 here, and we will pick up the conversation with the locomotive engineer witness statement and the pilot locomotive engineer witness statements in part 7. So like, share, subscribe, make sure to remain subscribed, and on that, have a great day, and I will see you next time.